Spiritual Christianity, collected from the theological works of Emanuel Swedenborg. Chapter 7. There are phenomena of frequent occurrence in the other life which prove, past a doubt, that the appearance of space or distance, with all the objects comprehended in space, is nothing more than a condition of the external or sentient faculties of the mind, the divine influx terminating in those various sensations which represent in their complexity the relative love of angels to the Lord and their charity or love for one another. From Arcana Celestia 4882. The following, which is the result of experience, will serve to show that spaces and times in the spiritual world are states of life, and that the whole of the life is from the Lord. Every spirit and angel sees the good on his right hand and the wicked on his left, and he so sees them to whatever quarter he may turn himself, whether he turn to the east or to the west, to the south or to the north, still the same phenomena is presented. The good are at his right hand and the wicked at his left. And this is the case with every good spirit or angel, so that if two were to come together and one were to look towards the east and the other towards the west, to both of them equally the good would appear on the right hand and the wicked on the left. From Arcana Celestia 10189. Heaven is so constituted that they who have the light of truth in their minds are at the right hand and in the southern quarter. They whose minds are in the shade of truth are at the left hand and consequently in the northern quarter. In front are they who have a clear perception of goodness and who are therefore in the eastern quarter, and at the back are those who have but an obscure perception of goodness and who are consequently in the western quarter. For they who are in states of goodness compose the celestial kingdom of the Lord, they who are in states of truth his spiritual kingdom. This appearance is presented to angels which way soever they turn themselves, for they have the Lord, who is the east itself, perpetually before their faces. But the very contrary is the case in hell, for there they have the Lord always at their backs. And the reason is that in the other life the four quarters are not determined as in this world to certain fixed regions, but are in agreement with the states of the mind and its ruling loves. For every angel and every spirit is his own peculiar love, and where that is, thither he turns himself. Where the state is one of love to the Lord and charity towards the neighbour, and of faith, which is the effect of that love, then in every turning of the body, with its face, they behold the Lord always before them. For it is he who turns them, entering into them by the way of the east, and holding their mind directed, and limited perpetually to himself, so that their external sight, being determined by their internal sight, which is the sight of their intellect, and this by the love of their will, looks wheresoever love directs. The case is the same with man in this world in respect to the interior states of his will and his intellect, which are his spirit. From Arcana Celestia 3638. All the societies in the other life, whatever be their number, retain constantly the same relative situation to the Lord, who appears to the whole of heaven as the sun. And it is an astonishing fact, which, from its not being comprehended, will scarcely be credited, that societies there keep the same situation relatively to the same person, wherever he may be and whatever way he may turn himself and move about. Those societies, for example, that appear at his right hand are always on his right hand, and those at his left hand are always on his left, although he may change the direction of his face and body. From Arcana Celestia 9668. Angels constantly turn their faces towards the Lord as the sun, because they are in the Lord and he in them, and the Lord within them guides and turns their affections and their thoughts constantly to himself. It is for this reason impossible for them to look in any other direction than towards the east, where the Lord appears as the sun. It is evident from this that angels do not turn themselves to the Lord, but that he turns them to himself. For when they think interiorly of him, they then think of him in no other way than as being in them. For distance is not caused by interior thought, but by exterior, which acts in union with the sight of the eyes, and the reason is that exterior thought is in space, but not interior, and when the thought is not in space, as in the spiritual world, it is still in the appearance of space. From Arcana Celestia 9864. In the heavens, all, without any exception, turn their faces towards the Lord, and, what is astonishing, they do so whatever be the quarter towards which they turn themselves. And it is from this cause that in the heavens there is a conjunction of all as one. But they who are not in heaven turn their faces away from the Lord, and the more so as they are more remote from heaven. Therefore, as they have no love to God and their neighbour, but love themselves and the world, with them there is disjunction or separation. But this is a mystery which will not be credited by those who think according to the fallacies of the senses. And from Arcana Celestia 9668. All who are in heaven have the Lord before their eyes, for there to look before them is to look at him, whichever way they turn themselves. But this is a mysterious truth which the natural man is unable to comprehend. From Arcana Celestia 9828. The kingdom of the Lord, which is the spiritual world, is a kingdom of uses. And as uses in that world are ends, it is a kingdom of ends. But in that kingdom the ends of life are subsidiary to one another in various orders, and are also consociated. The ends which are subsidiary are called mediate ends. Those which are consociated are called consociate ends. All these ends are so mutually and subordinately joined together that they all regard one end, which one end is the most universal of all, for it is the Lord. And in heaven, with those who receive the Lord, it is love to him and faith in him. Love, then, is the end of all their wills, and faith the end of all their thoughts of their intellect. There being in this way a direction of their love and their thought, in the whole as well as singularly to one end, they are kept in an indissoluble connection and are one. For they are kept in the sight and under the rule and providence of the One, who, according to the laws of subordination and consociation, gently turns them all towards himself, and so cojoins them to himself, and at the same time to their companions mutually and reciprocally. It is from this that the faces of all in heaven are kept turned to the Lord, who is the sun there, and astonishingly as it may appear, which way soever they turn themselves, their sight is still directed to him. Because the Lord is in the goodness of their mutual love, and in the goodness of their charity towards their neighbour. For he loves all, and by love joins all together, and therefore by looking at their companions from that love, they are also turned to the Lord. And from Arcana Celestia 4797. Changes in the state of their affections appear in the faces of angels depicted to the life. For when they are in their own societies, they have then their own countenances, but not so when they visit another society. For then their faces undergo a change in agreement with the affections for goodness and for truth prevailing in that society, the genuine countenance being as a plane which is recognized in those changes. Back to Tulk's commentaries, paragraph 124. Why is it said that they, who think in the fallacies of the senses, will not credit the above spiritual facts? The answer is plain. They will not be able to understand them. For believing as they do, in agreement with those fallacies, that the sensuous objects which are presented to them have a causal existence external to the sentient faculties and distinct from them, and that they endure in a time which is independent of their own sensations, such facts as these, which cannot be reconciled to their natural belief, must needs appear impossible. And were it really so that there were this externaity and interdependency in a world which by its changes gave birth to sensations, and not that their seemingly externaity and interdependency were fallacies belonging to the natural conditions of our minds, such phenomena would indeed be altogether impossible. Their possibility depends upon their being created by an influx of the divine life from within the spheres of percipiency which are common to all finite forms of mind. The divine life calls forth in their order the holy affections of a regenerated will, the thoughts which agree with those affections and in which they are exhibited, and lastly, such like sensuous objects as appear in the natural world. These last, as well as their thoughts and affections, coexist in the living conscious mind, and in no respect beyond it in any external space which the natural man, before he has been spiritually instructed, and while he yields to the fallacy of appearances, attributes to nature. When the creation of all things in the spiritual world is thus understood, the above phenomena will no longer be considered impossible, but will be distinctly seen to be in harmony with the general laws of correspondency. In that world, where those spheres of life which are contrary kinds are separated from one another, such internal separation is represented by none but good spirits being seen on the right hand at every turning of the body, and none but the wicked on the left. Now such a phenomena as this would be impossible where there is a fixed space, whatever be the cause of that fixicity. In a fixed space, the turning of the body in an opposite direction would place the good on the left hand and the wicked on the right, or rather, in a world of fixed space, where opposite spheres are not separated from one another in any one person, states of life would seem, and actually do seem, to have nothing whatever to do with the position of others in relation to ourselves. But in the world of separated spheres it is different. There the turning of the body would, as in the world, bring other beings into a view, but the general uniform relationship of spheres being preserved, and their external presence being the effect of a spiritual approximation, there is nothing to hinder the sensuous presentation from being the exact image of the internal affinity or of the discordancy of minds. The sensuous images of affections in their various forms being thus created by a spiritual influx of divine life into the sentient faculties of the mind, it is easy, when this is seen, to understand how two good spirits or angels, when they meet and stand opposite to one another, both equally have the good on their right hands and the wicked on their left, which is the very reverse of what would happen in the natural world, where the mind conceives the sensuous image to be produced by a physical influx, and where the objects of the senses, from their unplastic nature, favour the supposition of their having a fixed external world as their cause. Though they stand opposite to each other, and indeed it may be said, because they stand face to face, they have both of them the east before their sight. For their minds are receptive of the Lord's divine love and wisdom, though after a different manner, this difference of reception and the imperfect measure of reception being the ground of their conscious individuality. But the minds of both are receptive, and as there is no other space than what exists as an appearance in the sentient faculties of each, in those faculties the image which corresponds to a heavenly state of both is exhibited, but so exhibited that it appears to them as the objects of nature appear to us, not within the sentient faculties, but beyond them. And this appearance of outness is also correspondent to the imperfect reception of every finite mind, and this is the origin of space, through all its degrees, natural as well as spiritual. Good spirits and angels have no difficulty in comprehending this, because they do not, like men, think in the fallacy of effects, but invariably in the truth of causes. Effects with them cease to be fallacious because they are never mistaken for causes. Time and space are intuitively perceived to be the outburst of the thought and not to be the cause of its production. It may be considered then as a universal law that the more completely the mind is brought within the sphere of the divine order, the more plastic do those sensuous objects become, which represent such a well-ordinated state of the mind, and the less similitude do they bear, in the law of their changes, to that dead, unyielding nature on the stage of which those fallacies are so readily admitted and so frequently confirmed. Paragraph 125. Perhaps the most striking illustration of the power which the influx of spiritual spheres have over the mind in moulding the sensuous image to accordance with itself, that image which it is the instrument of producing in the sentient faculties, is to be found in the last of the above cited passages. So long as an angel remains in his own society, it is said that he has his own countenance, the countenance which represents in the expression of every feature the form of his individual mind, when in relation to spheres of life which are at most in affinity to his own. But when he visits another society, his countenance, and indeed his whole person, will become altered in correspondency to the change which his mind undergoes by being subject to the spiritual influx of another social sphere. Were he to visit in succession 100 distinct societies, his countenance and person would undergo 100 different changes, modifying, more or less according to the affinity of spheres, that original countenance and person, which belong to the spiritual uses of his own society. They give to him the aspect under which he is seen by every member of his own society, but as the individual form of mind, which is its tendency and adaptation to special uses, must forever remain, notwithstanding the diversity of relations, which is involved in and signified by the visits which are made to other societies. Therefore the individual countenance remains as a plane, which countenance is still seen and recognized, however great and various the changes through which it may be passing. Paragraph 126. Such is the plasticity of objects in the spiritual world, and such are the cause and reason of their plasticity. They have all the properties of matter which are included in tangibility, visibility, audibility. They are fragrant and soporific, but they have not the death-like inertness which belongs to the matter of this world, for in heaven there is no resistance in their minds to the influx of the divine love. Their affections are as tender as they are pure, and they yield willingly to the divine impression. When from the heaven of a self-subduing spirit the divine life descends, as it were, into the sentient regions of their minds, the representative images are, in the several qualities of matter, as plastic as their wills are innocent and loving, and as various as are the truths which with their intellects are enriched. Paragraph 127. Such then are the phenomena which, because of their incompatibility with a supposed external world, demonstrate that spaces and times are states of life, and that the objects of the senses, which in their simultaneous presentation to the mind impart to it, by influx from the Lord, the appearance of an outward space, and in their successive variation the appearance of an outward time, are nothing more than the conditions of the sentient faculties which represent the relations of heavenly thought and love.